The Jedi Code, revered and studied for millennia, stands as the foundation of the Jedi Order's philosophy and practice. It seeks to guide its adherents toward harmony, balance, and an elevated state of detachment from the mundane pitfalls of emotion and desire. On the surface, the Code offers a noble path to enlightenment and peace, promoting the virtues of selflessness, calm, and understanding. Yet beneath this seemingly unassailable moral structure lies a labyrinth of contradictions, omissions, and flawed principles that have, time and again, exposed the Jedi Order to vulnerability, hubris, and ultimately collapse. The most apparent fault of the Jedi Code is its rigid absolutism. It proclaims definitive rules about the nature of emotions and attachment. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. These edicts, while poetic and aspirational, impose a binary worldview that leaves little room for the complexity of sentient existence. The prohibition against emotion, for example, demands an impossible standard of detachment. Jedi are trained to suppress feelings of love, anger, fear, and even joy, as if these emotions are inherently corruptive. But emotions are not mere distractions, they are intrinsic to the sentient experience. They inform our decisions, ground our morality, and bind us to one another. By denying this fundamental aspect of their nature, Jedi are often left ill-equipped to navigate the moral ambiguities of real life. Take the case of Anakin Skywalker. His fall to the dark side is often framed as a personal failure, but it also reflects the inherent flaws within the Jedi Code. Anakin's deep attachment to those he loves, particularly Padme Amidala, was in direct conflict with the Jedi's prohibition against attachment, but instead of guiding him through the complexities of these emotions, the Jedi demanded that he repress them. This suppression not only isolated Anakin but also left him vulnerable to manipulation by Darth Sidious, who offered him a path that appeared to reconcile his love and his power. In truth, Anakin's tragedy was not that he felt too much, but that he was never taught how to manage what he felt within the Jedi framework. The Code's inflexible stance on attachment and emotion thus became a catalyst for one of the greatest catastrophes in galactic history. Moreover, the Jedi Code's emphasis on serenity and detachment creates a false dichotomy between passion and morality. It implies that only through the rejection of personal desire can one achieve a state of ethical clarity. Yet passion is not inherently destructive. It is a powerful force that, when channeled correctly, can drive individuals toward heroic acts of courage and sacrifice. The Code fails to recognize that it is not passion itself that leads to the dark side, but the inability to balance it with wisdom and self-control. By discouraging Jedi from embracing their passions in any form, the Code deprives them of a vital source of strength and purpose. This denial often results in a dangerous undercurrent of hypocrisy, as Jedi who inevitably experience strong emotions may feel shame and guilt, further distancing themselves from the support of their peers and the guidance they need. The Jedi Order's obsession with detachment also fosters a sense of elitism and alienation from the wider galaxy. The Jedi are trained to see themselves as guardians of peace and justice, yet their philosophy often estranges them from the very people they are sworn to protect. The citizens of the galaxy experience the full spectrum of emotions and attachments, forming families, communities, and alliances that are deeply rooted in personal bonds. By positioning themselves as above these connections, the Jedi risk becoming detached, not just from their own humanity, but from the realities of those they serve. This detachment is most evident on Coruscant, where the Jedi Temple stands as a towering symbol of their isolation. From their ivory tower, the Jedi often intervene in conflicts with a clinical approach that prioritizes abstract principles over the nuanced needs of individuals. This detachment breeds resentment and mistrust among the populace, who may see the Jedi as aloof enforcers of an esoteric doctrine rather than compassionate protectors. The flaws of the Jedi Code extend beyond its philosophical tenets to its practical application in training and governance. Jedi initiates are taken from their families at a young age and raised within the strict confines of the Order, effectively severing them from any pre-existing emotional ties. While this practice is intended to prevent attachments that could lead to the dark side, it also robs these younglings of the opportunity to develop a natural, healthy relationship with their emotions and identities. They are molded into idealized instruments of the Force, but at the cost of their individuality and personal growth. The Code's one-size-fits-all approach to training fails to account for the diverse backgrounds and temperaments of its students, leading to a rigid and often oppressive environment that stifles creativity and self-expression. This rigidity is mirrored in the Jedi's approach to conflict resolution. The Code promotes an ideal of balance and harmony, yet in practice, the Jedi often find themselves entangled in the political and military machinations of the Republic. Their role as peacekeepers frequently places them in morally compromising situations, where the line between right and wrong is blurred. The Clone Wars serve as a stark example of this dilemma. Despite their commitment to peace, the Jedi willingly became generals in a galaxy-wide conflict, leading armies into battle and making strategic decisions that resulted in countless deaths. In doing so, they compromised their own values and became complicit in the very violence they sought to prevent. The Code provided no guidance for navigating such ethical complexities, leaving the Jedi to grapple with their actions in a moral vacuum. Perhaps the most insidious flaw of the Jedi Code is its failure to adequately address the nature of the dark side. The Code presents the dark side as an external force, a corrupting influence that must be resisted at all costs. This dualistic view simplifies the struggle between light and dark, casting it as a battle between good and evil. But the dark side is not an external entity, it is a part of the Force, and by extension, a part of every living being. The Jedi's refusal to acknowledge this internal aspect of the dark side leaves them vulnerable to its seduction. By framing darkness as something wholly separate from themselves, Jedi are often unprepared to confront the shadows within their own hearts. This denial not only weakens their resolve but also blinds them to the subtleties of the dark side's allure. Count Dooku's fall illustrates this point. As a Jedi, Dooku was a paragon of the Order's ideals, but he grew disillusioned with the corruption and inefficacy of the Republic. His turn to the dark side was not driven by a desire for power, but by a genuine belief that the Jedi Code and the Republic it served were inherently flawed. Dooku's fall was not a sudden descent into evil, but a gradual shift in perspective, born of frustration and a desire for change. Yet the Jedi, bound by their rigid adherence to the Code, failed to see the signs of his growing discontent. They viewed his defection as a betrayal rather than an opportunity for introspection and reform. The Jedi Code's insistence on moral absolutism also hinders the Order's ability to adapt and evolve. The galaxy is in a constant state of flux, with new challenges and threats emerging over time. Yet the Jedi, anchored by the immutable tenets of the Code, often struggle to respond effectively to these changes. Their reliance on tradition and precedent prevents them from embracing innovative solutions or questioning their established practices. This stagnation ultimately leaves the Order vulnerable to external threats, as they are often caught unprepared for the shifting dynamics of power and influence in the galaxy. Ultimately, the flaws of the Jedi Code are not merely philosophical but existential. By imposing an idealized vision of morality and detachment, the Code creates a brittle framework that cannot withstand the complexities of real life. It demands perfection from its adherents while offering little guidance for navigating the imperfections of the world. In their pursuit of peace and harmony, the Jedi inadvertently sow the seeds of conflict and discord, both within themselves and in the galaxy they strive to protect. The tragedy of the Jedi is not that they fail to live up to their ideals, but that their ideals, as enshrined in the Code, are fundamentally flawed. Their inability to reconcile their philosophy with the realities of life makes them blind to the very dangers they seek to avoid. And in that blindness lies their greatest weakness, a flaw that has led to the fall of their Order time and again. Their destiny, bound by their unyielding Code, serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most noble of intentions can be undone by an unexamined creed. The tragedy of the Jedi Order deepens when one examines the consequences of their refusal to embrace the full spectrum of the Force. The Jedi Code insists on a dichotomous interpretation. The light side represents order, serenity, and selflessness, while the dark side symbolizes chaos, passion, and selfish ambition. However, the Force itself is a singular, interconnected entity, and its division into light and dark is a conceptual framework imposed by the Jedi and the Sith alike. By rigidly adhering to this binary perspective, the Jedi not only limit their understanding of the Force, but also cut themselves off from a broader sense of balance. Balance, as the Jedi interpret it, means the suppression of the dark side. Yet in their quest to eliminate darkness, they unwittingly perpetuate it. The dark side thrives in the shadows of denial and repression. By refusing to acknowledge the presence of darkness within themselves, the Jedi inadvertently give it more power. They teach their initiates to fear the dark side, but fear itself is an emotion they are instructed to avoid. This contradiction creates a cycle of inner conflict as Jedi struggle to reconcile their natural impulses with the demands of their code. Luke Skywalker's journey offers a poignant counterpoint to this paradigm. Unlike his predecessors, Luke confronts the darkness within him without succumbing to it. His confrontation with Darth Vader on the second Death Star is a testament to the strength that comes from accepting, rather than denying, one's darker impulses. Luke's moment of rage, when he briefly gives in to his anger, does not lead to his downfall but to a moment of profound clarity. By recognizing the parallels between himself and his father, Luke chooses a different path, not through the rejection of darkness, but through the conscious decision to transcend it. In that moment, he achieves a level of balance that the Jedi Code, in its rigidity, could never offer. The Jedi's failure to embrace this holistic view of the Force also impacts their decision-making and governance. The Order's insistence on emotional detachment often leads to a cold, utilitarian approach to problem-solving. While the Jedi see themselves as impartial mediators, their detachment can make them appear callous and indifferent to the suffering of others. This is particularly evident in their role during the Clone Wars. Despite their professed commitment to peace, the Jedi became active participants in a war that resulted in widespread devastation. They justified their actions as a necessary means to an end, yet their involvement in the war only served to further entrench the cycle of violence and suffering. The Jedi's role as generals during the Clone Wars also highlights their susceptibility to manipulation. By aligning themselves so closely with the Republic, the Jedi compromised their independence and became tools of a corrupt political system. Chancellor Palpatine, under the guise of benevolent leadership, exploited the Jedi's loyalty to the Republic to further his own agenda. The Jedi, blinded by their adherence to the Code and their belief in the righteousness of their cause, failed to recognize the growing threat within their ranks. Their inability to adapt to the changing political landscape left them vulnerable to the machinations of the Sith, culminating in their near-total annihilation during Order 66. This failure underscores another critical flaw of the Jedi Code: its reliance on external authority. The Jedi see themselves as servants of the Force, but in practice they often subordinate their will to the Republic or the Jedi Council. This deference to institutional authority can stifle individual agency and critical thinking. Jedi are taught to trust in the wisdom of their masters and the Council, but this trust can become a form of complacency. When faced with situations that require independent judgment, Jedi may find themselves paralyzed by indecision or constrained by the limitations of the Code. This dynamic is evident in the experiences of Qui-Gon Jinn, a Jedi who frequently clashed with the Council over matters of principle. Qui-Gon's willingness to challenge authority and follow his instincts set him apart from his peers, but it also made him an outsider within the Order. His tragic death at the hands of Darth Maul deprived the Jedi of one of their most insightful and forward-thinking members, illustrating the cost of the Order's rigid hierarchy. Another manifestation of the Jedi Code's flaws is its impact on interpersonal relationships. By discouraging attachment, the Code seeks to prevent the kind of possessive love that can lead to jealousy and fear. However, this approach also inhibits the formation of deep, meaningful connections. Jedi are taught to prioritize their duty to the Order above all else, but this often comes at the expense of their personal growth and emotional well-being. The bonds of friendship and mentorship that form within the Order are implicitly conditional, bound by the expectation of detachment. When these bonds are tested, as they often are in times of crisis, the Jedi are left with few avenues for support and reconciliation. This dynamic is painfully evident in the relationship between Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Despite their close bond, Obi-Wan's adherence to the Jedi Code prevents him from fully understanding or supporting Anakin's struggles. Anakin, in turn, feels isolated and misunderstood, his inner turmoil compounded by the secrecy surrounding his relationship with Padme. The lack of open communication and emotional support within the Jedi Order creates an environment where vulnerabilities are hidden rather than addressed. This culture of silence and suppression ultimately contributes to Anakin's downfall, as he seeks solace and guidance outside the Order, where the dark side awaits. The Jedi Code's limitations are also reflected in its approach to prophecy and foresight. The Jedi possess the ability to glimpse the future through the Force, but their interpretation of these visions is often clouded by their rigid worldview. They view prophecy as a guide to their actions, yet their understanding of it is frequently flawed or incomplete. The prophecy of the Chosen One, who is destined to bring balance to the Force, is a prime example. The Jedi interpret this prophecy as a mandate to destroy the Sith, but they fail to consider what true balance might entail. Their narrow focus on the eradication of darkness blinds them to the possibility that balance requires the coexistence of light and dark. This misinterpretation of prophecy leads to a series of catastrophic decisions, including their initial mistrust of Anakin and their eventual failure to prevent his fall. The Jedi's reliance on prophecy, coupled with their rigid adherence to the Code, creates a dangerous combination of overconfidence and fatalism. They believe themselves to be the architects of destiny, yet their actions often hasten the very outcomes they seek to avoid. In the end, the flaws of the Jedi Code are not simply theoretical or philosophical, they are profoundly practical, shaping the fate of individuals and the galaxy as a whole. The Code's rigid prescriptions and binary morality create an environment where inner conflict, hypocrisy, and disillusionment thrive. The Jedi's failure to adapt, to embrace the full spectrum of the Force, and to reconcile their ideals with the realities of existence leads to their repeated downfall. The tragedy of the Jedi is not merely a failure of individual characters, but a systemic collapse born of an inflexible creed. Their story serves as a powerful reminder that even the noblest of intentions must be tempered by humility, self-awareness, and a willingness to evolve.